The Hennessy Report from Keystone Partners, a free-flowing conversation with leaders in the HR community, talking about themselves, the industry, and their work. Brought to you in cooperation with NERA, the Northeast Human Resources Association.
Welcome to the Hennessy Report by Keystone Partners. I'm Dave Hennessy, and today's guest is Brian Stolz, the Chief People Officer at Element Biosciences. And joined for this episode is our West Coast market leader at Keystone, Hutchins. Good to have her on for this discussion as well. And Brian talks about his early life in Japan and how that changed his perspective on international business. And then he talks a little bit about Element Bio and what they're focused on from a science perspective, and a lot about their culture, what it's built on: respect, authenticity, collaboration. His perspective on team building and how diversity of thought and backgrounds is so important. How AI is transferring talent management for him and in the HR processes at Element, something that's on everybody's mind. The future of bio life sciences is promising, Brian says, and he's seeing evidence of a real turnaround in the industry and how the investment trends in the biosector are shifting. He also talks about how laughter is essential for maintaining perspective in life and in work. You'll enjoy Brian. I certainly enjoyed our conversation with him and Shar. And then at the very end of our episode, we have our newer segment, our Coach's Corner, and you'll hear from Keystone's very own Vicky Reel, and she'll be giving us all advice about career development. So little tips for all of us. And now our conversation with Brian Stolz. Brian, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
It's so great that Mike Panos and Mike Previty, you're one of your co-founders there at Element, made the connection. And it's kind of fitting that two guys named Mike are introducing us for a podcast. Sorry for the bad humor, but great to have you.
I got a lot of Mikes in my life, so it does actually fit.
First, we have another guest on the podcast too. We have my colleague and our West Coast market leader, Charlene Hutchins, joining us for the discussion. She's based in San Diego, where Element Bio is based. And now the first question is, what's an early life moment for you, Brian? As you look back on it now, you see it as an inflection point for who you've become as a professional.
Yeah. So I'll take you back to 1988. I was living in northern New Jersey, just outside of New York City. My father was an accountant. I came home from school one day, having never been on a plane or never being further west than Buffalo, New York. And he says, "We're moving to Tokyo." And I said, "What's Tokyo?" I had no idea what was happening. And we were very lucky. He got transferred over to be the that time Cooper's Library, now PwC, but the international partner for 4 years in Tokyo. I was able to go to the American school, took that first flight from JFK to Narita, and it just completely opened up the aperture of my life. Frankly, my friends looked like we were essentially part of the UN. Friend from Sweden, friend from Taiwan. I was exposed to so many different things, and it just really changed my perspective. Also introduced me to all of these great business leaders, because my father was friends with lots of business leaders in Tokyo, like the head of Coca-Cola Japan, the head of then Northwest Airlines and United Airlines. And it gave me that fascination about what business was and what international business could look like, and also how commerce can connect the globe. So by far and away, literally, I'm not here. I'm probably in Northeast and New Jersey, still having a good life, but it would have been a very, very different life for me without.
Yeah, amazing experience. It just opened you up to so many possibilities and connections, of course, too. That's great. Well, tell us about Element Bio. I'm fascinated. I understand you serve the other biotechs. You serve the industry. So I have that right, Brian? And maybe kind of first, before you talk about the company, just the science of it, but in layman's terms, can you make it simple for us non-PhD scientists to understand what it is that you're providing to the world?
Yeah. So I joined, it's now 4.5 years. And I joined a company that was about to launch its first genetic sequencer. And what genetic sequencing does is it tries to understand all the different components that make up our DNA. You can also use it to find RNA or proteins or other things. And the use case that I hadn't been in this industry, the one that I was able to understand was during the pandemic times when they were testing wastewater. You were using a sequencer in order to see what was popping up. And even more impressive, when you think about the vaccines and Moderna as one of the ones coming up with the mRNA vaccine, they didn't even have access to the virus at the start of when they came up with their first draft of the virus. They had access to the sequence. And so basically it breaks down things into its components. And from there, they were able to figure out what was going on and what they needed to block or do differently as part of that. So that's where we started. The thing I'm most excited about, though, is about a year ago now, we launched a product called a VD24. A VD is the first sequencer. And what a VD24 lets us do is on the exact same sample, run what they call multi-omics. So now we can look at different things. So you can look at the DNA, sure, the RNA. So what the signalings are, proteins, things like that. But where I think it takes us is that step closer to personalized medicine. So for example, we took cultured cancer cells and we hit it with two different types of drugs. One was a first gen called a kinase inhibitor. The other one was a third gen. And we were able to map out what happens throughout that and measure cell death in a 24-hour period, which was really, really cool. And we had a woman who had never done drug discovery before. She was like, wow, there's something strange happening in the pathway in this place. And she blocked it. And she was able to turn a first gen to be as efficacious as a third gen, meaning that the improvement, you didn't even need to pay for the extra improvement. So you think about, for generics and whatnot, that could go there. We're working on seeing if we can do it in other areas. And so you could imagine in the future taking something like a biopsy, putting it on a machine, hitting it with 5 or 10 different therapeutics and seeing which one has the best efficacy. The other piece is, can we figure out how we're also looking at toxicity? And so, today, the standard of care is you have cancer, your oncologist will tell you, try this. Oh, that didn't work. Let's try another one. Let's try another one. This could fast track all of that so that we get better and better at understanding what really happens. There's a bunch of other implications too on the upfront in terms of diagnostics. And anyway, our goal as we keep moving forward is how do we make precision medicine accessible and frankly affordable, and really get ourselves out there. And I think with what we've done with the multi-omics, that's where I'm super excited for our trajectory.
Wow. You seem very excited about Element Bio. You can just tell in your tone and your voice. It's funny. You actually know the science very well, and you don't come from the chief people officer background. You have and this starts with your answer to the question about how you said you spent a lot of time in Tokyo, in Japan. You have a very unique background, Brian. You have been leader in a science division. You've been a COO. You've worked in investing in consulting and in private equity in different places. How has that informed your philosophy around talent as you've brought it to Element Bio, your background? How do you think about HR and the people function?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think first off, if you look at my background, it's definitely one where you can't draw a straight line, but the way I do kind of unify it is over time, and I love business. I read business books or I listen to podcasts, all that stuff in the background. Over time, my unifying theory is you need a great strategy that's executable. You need excellent talent, and you give that talent the playbook for how to work together, also known as the culture. And if you get the confluence of those three things together, that's where the magic happens. And I think there's a couple of things that I've noticed. One, the further up you go, your job is a people leader anyway. It really is. So CEOs are always having to deal with, yes, strategy, but then also the people issue. And I get a lot of excitement seeing the magic happen when you get those three things working well together. I get a jolt when I'm like, this person is perfect for this job that we're posting for. I get excitement when I hear how happy they are working, that we've found that right fit, both culturally and skill set wise. And so, I've kind of gone along with, I go where I'm interested, and then also with the people who I want to work with in an environment that allows me to be me and where I'm going to have fun. And so I like to be internally collaborative, externally competitive, and looking for those sorts of things. But all of that comes back to the unifying theory of I love strategy in business. The consulting time really taught me that piece. I really enjoyed talent selection, and working at a company called GH Smart. The book Who and the Who method is how I was raised on how to do talent selection. And then the culture piece came later. I was part of both some great successes, but I also saw some things, frankly, that didn't go as well. And learning the importance of you can't just have the talent and the strategy. It's insufficient. You really have to give people that shorthand so that they're working efficiently, effectively, and you're picking the right people in order to do the things the way you want them done. And so, yeah, through time, those three things are kind of the bedrock or foundation of what I get excited about working.
You mentioned culture, and so could you describe a little bit about when you're looking for that fit, when you're attracting talent, how
Yep.
do you describe it to a prospective candidate at all levels, and how do you know you got the right person based on the culture? Maybe a little bit of description of the Element Bio culture.
Yeah, and I think you have to figure out what you're aiming for, and then you also have to be realistic about what you're actually doing, because I think I got Ben Horowitz wrote a book, "You Are What You Do," and he's from Andreessen Horowitz, and I fully ascribe to that theory. You can say I'm doing X, but if you actually do Y is your culture.
Right.
And so
It's
the
not the
way though
espoused culture. It's what it is.
exactly,
Right?
your culture is the worst behavior you tolerate. That's kind of one way I've heard it, and I fully agree with that. What we like to do. And I think our culture, or at least our values, is a good descriptor of our CEO, Molly Hay. And what Molly loves is, first, it's leading with respect. If you go into a room with Molly, you will feel her respecting and listening to you. Embracing authenticity. So what's really happening and how does that work? Some of the other things that we talk about is owning our successes and failures, lifting and empowering each other. There's a grittiness to the company, and then disrupting the norm. So you have to be a little crazy to be a CEO founder. And this company is no different than that. There is a massive competitor that all three of my co-founders worked at called Illumina. Many people have tried to create sequencers that could compete with them, and many have failed. And we were able to create what I think is the best sequencer on the market in the shortest amount of time with the lowest dollar investment. And that is pretty remarkable. And you need to be rowing in the same direction to have that happen. So back to your question on culture, it's like we look for people who value those values. We look for people who understand it's about the we, not about your own accolades. And where we do our best work is when there's not a bunch of credit grabbing or finger pointing, where instead it's like, hey, there's a problem. Let's all tackle that together and figure it out. And, early on, Mike Previty, who you talked about, he had a town hall with the R&D group where he described it like, imagine you're all working together and you're essentially in a cul-de-sac, living in this cul-de-sac together. And, sometimes you may need to borrow, the lawnmower from the guy across the street, but that's the help that you're getting. And, this whole idea of it's a gift to find the problem. That means it's a problem to solve. And then figuring out how you're working together as a neighborhood to get that problem solved and working together. That I think is where we get a lot of our power. And the number one strength a small company has, its ability to be nimble, to be flexible. And so, with us, we want people who can be flexible. We want people who are okay with change, who are understanding that if we're all successful, there'll be plenty of credit to go around. Trying to work across those lines. I don't like silos. I don't really like the infighting that comes along when these massive structures and politics and all those things take root. And so what we're trying to do, to be candid, it's always hard because the human nature actually goes towards the silos and the in-group, out-group stuff. But what we're trying to do is keep that to a minimum and keep people working together and rowing in the same direction.
That's great. I really like the gritty term because I think there's descriptive words like that. They kind of it's like, oh, that's somebody that's going to figure out a way to get it done. It might not be all figured out and you might have to just push some things, but they're going to get it, So
Yep,
I like
exactly.
it.
Exactly.
I've heard from an inside source that you are particularly good at getting to know talent and knowing how to bring them together to form a great team. Can you talk about your philosophy with team building?
Yeah, and there's the HR side, so for my own personal teams, and then there's also how I'm trying to do it with both the executive team and then broader as I'm trying to help people build it up. So um, my philosophy on the people function is one that I think the roots are first personnel and then HR. Here we call it the people team because I'm wanting it to have a slightly different viewpoint. And where I feel like it goes well is you get the folks who do understand those three pillars that I talked about. So I need people who are fluent in understanding the culture and actually get to know the business. I want a lot of empathy for the managers in the position. So where I've had it done to me where I didn't enjoy it, it was do all of this work to justify my job as opposed to do as little work as possible to get the maximum outcome. And so I try and put that mindset into the people I hire, which is our job. We are a cost center. Our job is to make this business go as best as it can. And the way to do that is to think about what's the minimum amount of effort to get the maximum output. I'm a big believer of using tools and leveraging expertise and really pulling in the business to help us co-create things like what should our review process look like? How do we want to do the promotion cycle? And having a little bit of that Kanban continuous improvement mindset as we do that. So back to my team, then I'm looking for people who really love the business. Some of them are the non-traditional HR types. I've got actually two people who worked previously for PwC, one who was an auditor, the other one who was on the financial transaction sides. And then they found that love for the people side and knowing that that's such a key lever. And so, I followed a similar journey, and I like that. I like finding the folks that they see the business and our role in it as both critical, but understanding that we're in service of. We're not just justifying our own position that, hey, you need a big L&D program, even though a lot of them show that they haven't had great ROI. So anyway, that's my team. When I think about then the executive team, and actually for both of these, I'm looking for it. I want diversity of thought. I want diversity of backgrounds, diversity of styles. And I know there's lots of different ways to do it, but the one that resonated most with me was Myers-Briggs. I like to see that we're not all the same type. We're not all top-down thinkers, because otherwise we're going to miss things like, okay, how do we actually implement that? I like to have folks who recognize that, yes, checking the box is good, but others who say, yeah, but wait, let's see if there's any other more creative ideas out there, and having that natural tension. And doing so in a way where we have that mutual respect and where we are able to trust one another, but also push one another. I think for an executive team, you need that. If it's too polite, it's too much like a family, you're not going to get to the best ideas. If it's too combative and people start feeling like they can't bring something up, or they just don't want to deal with so-and-so person because it's not going to go well, you're not going to get the best ideas. And so a lot of it is around how do we create that nice sweet spot in the middle to make sure we have the right debate going, to make sure that it's okay to come up and say, hey, I'm struggling with this, and getting help from the rest of the team. Those are, my panacea. That's what we're creating. Does it always happen exactly that way? No, but that's where we're all humans, and that's kind of the fun of it. Like, how do we move through this crazy world together, trying to figure out how to get ourselves working towards that same mission? And then I think with leaders, when I'm trying to tell them what they need to do with their teams, the first thing is, hey, do not hire in your mirror. You need people who do things differently. And like, I'm self-aware. For my Myers-Briggs, I'm an E/I NTP, meaning I'm a big time top-down thinker. I struggle with the details. I need people who are detail-oriented around me. I've obviously had to lean into this a lot, but at the start, being such a strong T, I was like, well, that doesn't make sense. It's like humans don't always make sense. So you have to figure out how you're working on the empathy, and they make sense from an emotional standpoint. But I had to work myself through that. And then the P versus J, my time in consulting really made me ambidextrous at that one. But I always like to have people who love project management and checking the box and moving us forward to make sure we're accomplishing what we need to. And I think you need that natural balance. And so what I'm talking to those leaders, I'm like, understand your weaknesses and hire to bolster those. And the thought processes you need in the room, because you're not going to have all the answers. Some of the best gifts I've had in my career is knowing that no matter how good of an answer I think I have, it always gets better when I have smart people around me who can push the thinking. And so I just embrace that, and I try to get others to do the same. That we're competing externally, not internally, and that's where get that sort of talent pool together. You're going to be in great shape.
That's great. Last question before we bring Shar in here.
Yeah.
AI. You mentioned what's going on, the crazy world, what's going on, and
Yes.
AI is everywhere, and it's so important to talent and the people function. How are you using it? How do you plan to use it?
Yes. So me personally, I've been playing a lot with ChatGPT and with a few others. We've also put in a couple of tools to help us better understand. Many of us in the people function, we have disparate systems that don't talk to one another. And there's some interesting tools that are coming out now that let them build that connective tissue across, which has been really great. So where you can have your HRIS talking to your applicant tracking system, and also then following up with your review cycle. So you can start answering questions like, who was a good hire or not? Who's been a good interviewer or not? What kind of a trajectory is somebody on? Who do we need to keep an eye on for promotion? And who do we need to potentially stretch versus who's in a good place and we just need to keep them happy? Those sorts of questions that I think all of our managers have, we're trying to figure out how do we structure it in the right way. We're not there yet. We haven't finished all of that stuff yet, but those are some of the questions I'm looking for AI to help me solve. And then interesting thing happening within our function is you're seeing more and more HR leaders being the ones who are in charge of rolling out AI for the organization. And I think the reason for that is, one, it's the resource question is, do I hire a consultant? Do I use AI? Do I do some formation of that? And pushing teams to ask those questions, that's important. But then understanding the cultural impact of what you're doing with that, I think is key. As we've been moving along, I think we still have a lot of room to go, but we do have a vice president of AI. We're trying to use it to help make our tool better and easier to use for folks so that we do get ourselves closer to that personalized medicine. Today you usually find people are PhDs or master's students at least using a sequencer. And we want to get that so a tech can use it. And when you're doing a test at some point down the road, when we get into diagnostics, that's doable. So AI to accelerate that push, that makes a lot of sense for us. I'm really curious to see where it evolves.
So your new VP of AI is focused on AI more on your product.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I'm still talking to him and asking him questions about how I might use it elsewhere within the organization. Yeah. We have rolled ChatGPT out to many. We're starting to come up with sharing the good ideas of how people are using it. I think those of us who are playing around with it, that you're only as good as your best prompt. And so, what's good prompt management, all that sort of stuff. That's some way that we're thinking about it. And I think as we go through the budgeting process, asking, hey, are there tools that we could be using instead? Are there other ways to accomplish the same goal? Those are some of the things we're doing. We do still have a ways to go. But I think, for example, we're looking to bring in an executive assistant. That person needs to be fluent in AI in order for us to bring them in and then help our executives get more fluent and more use out of it. Person who runs software bioinformatics, he's a big proponent of this. He sits on the executive team with me. So I'm finding my champions, and we're kind of trying to lock arms together to say, how do we make sure we're doing the most that we can with the tool, and the tool constantly is evolving. And so the fun part is even if you're a little behind today, you can catch up, and you get to keep learning and growing with it. So that part gets me really excited. The challenge, I think, is going to be what happens with entry-level roles. I saw from Lightspeed Ventures, they were forecasting something like 28% of entry-level roles may go away. I'd love for us to lean into the efficiency, productivity gains, and instead do more things as opposed to cutting a bunch of jobs. But I think that's going to be something that all of us in the people function are going to have to think.
Absolutely. Well, it's interesting. You mentioned Moderna, based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The Cambridge-Boston area is a real hub for your industry. And yes. San Diego, also another big hub for your industry where you're headquartered. And I think it's a good time now to bring in Shar, who's based in
Yeah,
San Diego and is our market leader for Keystone and that whole West Coast, actually. And she has a question for you about this
sure.
topic.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Brian, I'd love to tap into your knowledge base of the overall industry in biolife science and where do you think it's going? I know I get so excited about all the incredible things that the biolife science community is doing here in San Diego and the way that we are changing the world. So I'd love to hear what you see as where the industry is going as we go into 2026.
Yeah, and thank you for the question. I think the first thing to think about, we still have so far to go to understand true systems biology. And I'm going to probably misquote our co-founder, Mike Previty, who introduced us. But as he described it, what sequencing does, if you think about a paragraph, is it picks out certain letters and maybe you can even get it into words. When we're moving forward to more multi-omics, you're now getting sentences together, and you might even get to a paragraph, but we're still so far away from understanding what the full book is. And the implications for that are, how do we understand the full system? So input here, output there, with so many different variables at play. It's what makes it so challenging, and the tools have been insufficient so far. We think we're getting better. We've got some more innovation coming down that I get excited about. And again, I think looking at it through the precision medicine lens, you look still only about 10% of discovered therapeutics make it all the way through to be a drug. That is way too low. We should be massively improving on that. And I think through the use of these tools, we're going to get there. We're going to get to a place where we understand with a better amount of certainty, like maybe you get yourself, instead of 1 in 10, you get yourself to 1 in 5, 1 in 3, 1 in 2. That may not sound like a lot, but if you get to a 50% success rate on therapeutics, imagine that many more therapeutics we can now come to market. And if you can lower the cost of that, think about all of the, in my last company, BridgeBio, all of the rare genetic diseases, the Mendelian diseases that we're trying to fight. It's often cost prohibitive to try and bring drug to market. So can you imagine where we're leveraging the tools to get ourselves more certainty before we spend $1 billion or whatever it is to bring a drug all the way through to approval? So that piece alone gets me very excited. The other places is our understanding of what are the key markers for the main killers in the world. So, you talk about cancer, of course, heart disease, the Alzheimer's and other areas like that, ALS. There's so many different things that we're still trying to understand what those diseases really do. What are the key markers for cancer? People start looking at now something called cell-free DNA, and we now have some tests for that, like the Gallieri test. I think there's a lot more to go. So where I do see us going on one side is better understanding and characterizing disease states. And then two, with that, hopefully better finding markers to identify more quickly, more rapidly what's happening. And if you think about humans and longevity, I'm stealing a little bit from Peter Attia in the book Outlive, but this idea of, we first had medicine 1.0 that was very crude. Medicine 2.0 was dealing with the viruses and other issues that you can do. So something's wrong, you figure out how to fix it. Penicillin being the first, one of the major things we found, and then all the evolutions from there. 3.0 and where we're headed, I think, is all along the side of something is going to go wrong with you if you're going to live to 100 years old. It just will. So how do you deal with that? Well, first, you find the things early. And if you find them early, your chances of being able to take care of them before they become a massive problem increase greatly. So get the diagnostic down better and then improve our therapeutics. And that, to me, is the evolution that we're looking to push. And I get very, very excited about that. So can we figure out better ways to do discovery work and development work, shorten the timelines, give even more certainty so the FDA feels even better about approving the drugs? And then on the flip side, getting better and more accurate with diagnosis up front. There's a lot of tests that happen now where the false positives are way too high. The false negatives are way worse, obviously. So most people say, okay, I'll deal with the false positives. But you just think about where and how we can go with that. And that to me is where I get so excited. I think the world is going to catch up. We're in for a massive step change in the space. And it makes me very excited to see us pushing that.
Yeah. Any thoughts around obviously so exciting. And I'm personally very excited about the personalized medicine that you mentioned
Yes.
earlier. I mean, I think we all know people that have gone through diseases and are facing challenges. We all have people in our lives like that. And I had a conversation just this morning with somebody who's trying to figure out with her mother the right medication to put her on, and how great it would be if we could use DNA to figure that out. From a therapeutic standpoint to help. So from an investment standpoint, any thoughts around, obviously we need dollars to do that. We need investment to do that. Any investment trends or investment insights you have as we go into 2026 on money coming into your industry and supporting that, and what we need to do to get better and moving forward?
Yeah, and it's interesting. I just was listening to a podcast with the chief investment officer for Morgan Stanley, and one of the things that he was saying is, while the economy has been growing, there actually has been recession going on in many of the industries. In the case of our industry, I think I joined at the peak. We had a bit of a bubble with COVID. So our valuations are way off. Money kind of dried up. There's a lot of companies that were formed in 2019, 2020 that have gone by the wayside. Yet I'm starting to feel a little more optimistic. I'm starting to see people understand a bit more of what could happen. And you're hearing the use case of how can we use AI to help us with finding the therapeutics to prosecute and see if we can get them out, finding the targets, I should say. And to me, you've got big pharma largely off, with the exception of maybe Eli Lilly. You've got some of the bigger players in our tool space that have been down, but you're starting to see some thawing. So I'm hopeful. I think we're going to get more people understanding the amount of value we can create by having a step change and improvement in healthcare. I think you're going to see more people start to come in, and I think valuations are going to start to climb. At least I'm hoping that. Yeah,
I love your optimism.
And I just, there's another book I read called The Coming Wave by one of the co-founders of DeepMind. He's now the head of AI at Microsoft. And he basically said that you're going to have AI and then you're going to have synthetic biology as the two main drivers for this next wave. And I feel like the market hasn't woken up yet to the synthetic biology side of things and what exactly can happen there, and the marrying of AI to what we can do with biology. It just makes me very excited. So I think that's where you're going to see the most dollars flowing into, if I were to guess.
Great. We just have a few questions left for you here, Brian. And if you could write a letter to your 30-year-old self getting professional career advice, dear Brian, what would you write?
So, it's funny. I went to, top schools, worked in investment banking, then worked at McKinsey. And I felt like I was always climbing a ladder and trying to get somewhere. And, it was a race to some place. And over time, I'm also going to steal from the guys who did Designing Your Life. They have an analogy that there is no ladder. And that's my advice to myself. There is no ladder. Their analogy is, think of instead you're in a boat and you go to different ports of call, and you can stay as long as you like. You get back in the boat when you want to go somewhere else. Maybe you can go back, maybe you can't. But this idea of going where you're most excited, going where you're most interested, not trying to compare yourself to your peers, but instead just trying to figure out what is it that's going to be a place where you can add disproportionate value, where you're going to be happy, where you can build the life that you want. That to me is the advice I'd want to give. Definitely to the person who was up at 4 a.m. kicking a colored printer that only printed 4 pages a minute. It would always break in the middle of the night before a big meeting, back in my investment banking days. There's like, relax, it'll be fine. Go after the things that are going to be exciting, that you're going to have the passion for. And for me, I've been a generalist. I've ended up though more in between tech and biotech / healthcare. And I'm so thrilled that you would look at that and say, well, how does that all play together? Well, ultimately here I am at a company that is super technical and also really into the science side. And so actually the skills from both sides ended up coalescing into a really interesting opportunity.
That's great. Well, here's the speed round. We just have a couple fun questions for you to wrap up. If you could go to dinner with anyone in the world who you've never met, who would it be?
That's a fascinating question. I'm such a fan of business and growth stories. There's probably the one of like, right now, the person whose brain I probably most want to pick would be Jamie Dimons. I think he's now seen so many different cycles, and he's got such amazing access to all different leaders. And I feel like there's
Chase.
JP Morgan Chase, CEO of JP Morgan Chase. There's just a perspective I think he brings. Also the type of person who, if you've followed his career, he was the number 2 and heir apparent at Citibank, and then he was fired without much warning and had to figure out how to rebuild. And not only did he rebuild, he's now by far the most important person in finance in the world. So he'd be way up there on my list. I think he comes to mind first.
That's great. And what makes you laugh? What are some of the things that amuse you that maybe don't amuse other people? What tickles your funny bone, Brian?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in laughter helping get us through this crazy ride called life. Well, I have 2 dogs. They always make me laugh. Got 2 daughters. Try and make sure we keep the laughter going at home. I find it's funny. I was in a class in business school that was called Power and Influence. And one of the classes, they asked, what do you want your legacy to be? And I, first off, don't take myself too seriously. And ultimately, as I was sitting there, I'm like, look, the reality of it is 100, 200 years from now, people might talk about 3, 5 people. It's probably nobody in this room. So don't think about it. Just do what's going to make you happy. Just go. I don't think the teacher liked that comment when I made it, but I still stand behind it. And I think a lot of it comes from, I find when things, people are losing perspective. That's where I usually get a little chuckle, or maybe not everybody else would.
Well, Brian, thank you so much for taking the time to be on our podcast. This was a lot of fun.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
I really enjoyed the conversation. Appreciate both of you, Dave and Char. Thank you so much for the time.
Well, here we are at Keystone's Coach's Corner as part of the Hennessy Report podcast, and we have Victoria Reel. Welcome, Vicki.
Thank you for having me here. Hi, everyone.
And Vicki, you have an interesting role here at Keystone. You're a player coach yourself, where you are vice president. We call it delivery lead, in which you manage some of our career consultants, as well as you deliver some of your own clients one-on-one as well. So you've got an interesting perspective. And you have a topic on your mind, I know, because we had a little pre-conversation, and it really is about career development. What can you tell us? What is career development, and why do people find it so difficult, Vicki?
Absolutely. Great place to kick off. So traditionally, I think people perceive career development as some big milestone, right? I got this degree, I got this promotion, I got this really fancy certification. But really all it is any forward motion, any time spent, any learning done on your function, your industry, your area of expertise in your career. That could be reading a weekly, newsletter from a thought leader. That could be listening to this podcast right now. This is career development. You're doing it. Great job. So that's career development. Why people struggle with this? There's a lot of different things that I've seen. First and foremost, let's start with overwhelm. Vicki, I can't put one more thing on my plate right now. Please don't ask me to go to a training, build a skill. I'm managing so much in my life. It's just too much to think about. Another big one I hear too is fear that I'm going to put all this time, money, effort, or energy into a something. And is the juice worth the squeeze? Is it going to pay out? Am I doing all this for nothing? It kind of feels like risky or uncertain. Procrastination and motivation are its own sort of swirl of challenges. And another one actually might be surprising, but toxic work environments. So this could be, a bad, situation with a previous leader or manager, or even like a toxic work environment. Sometimes that can be really stifling. But I just want people to remember that sometimes what's holding you back is what you're holding on to. So it's just so incredibly important to prioritize career development. So that's why I'm really excited to be here today talking about it.
I've had a lot of guests on the podcast, Vicky, that have talked about their career paths, and sometimes it just happens. People say, "I didn't really pursue this, and I ended up in this place anyway." And it seems like sometimes people just end up getting to good places in their career without being very thoughtful about it. So, just to play devil's advocate, why should people even care about career development? Won't they get there anyway?
Yeah, sure. Fair point. Yeah, I appreciate the pushback. I think the short answer is it breeds regret. So when I do career counseling, right, it's typically a symptom of something deeper going on. So some of the main pathways I see are, Vicky, I want to do something in my career. I'm not sure where I want to go. There's this career action, but lack of clarity. They want to figure out what that is. The other lens is career inaction. Vicky, I've been climbing the ladder, working in my job for 10 years. And I woke up one day and looked around and was like, how did I get here? What happened? So sometimes, if we're not driving our career, who is? Someone else. We just kind of fall into it. So I've seen, hey, everyone's getting this training. You're going to get it too. Or, oh, I have this project that popped up. We really need your help. Or, hey, there's this great promotion opportunity. You should check it out. And so we're sure. So when we're not clear, or we just kind of, go on like autopilot, it's not great, right? Because if we're not driving it, someone else was. And again, it's going to breed regret. So really, really important to not just kind of wish, right? There's this really great quote out there that says, don't grow a wishbone where a backbone should be. And I really feel like when it comes to career, it takes that action. It takes that step. So just kind of falling into it, it's going to breed regret. Yeah.
All right. So for our listeners, for people who want to take some action on career development, what are some steps? What tips do you have for people out there, Vicky?
Yeah. So I'm going to go with more the psychology of career development. I think that lens is a little bit more unique because there's a lot of broad conversations in HR about career development. There's so many frameworks out there. But I'm going to pull from a vocational psychologist. His name is Mark Savickas. And folks in my field are familiar with him. And he has a framework called the 4 C's. So the 4 C's are concern, control, confidence, and curiosity. And so I'm going to talk about each of these. So first one is concern. And concern is really just the pause to look ahead and wonder what's next. So concern sounds kind of negative and stressful, but really I just want people to just stop and look up. Stop looking down, look up. What's happening? What's next? Everyone's talking about AI. Okay, great. Well, how does that affect me? And how does that affect the broader, economy and my role? Great. Let's just start with concern, right? I would love for people to start with that. The next is control. This is a big one. I do hear a lot of finger pointing in my coaching. My boss didn't tell me about this, or I didn't know about that, or my company doesn't have professional development funding. So that's why
Right.
You are in control. This is your journey, your path, your career. The steering of that is on you. It really is. So yes, people can help you facilitate that, but you have the control. So I just want to empower you there. Curiosity is kind of more traditional, exploring new skills. So I always encourage my clients to do a fake job search every year. Just do a pretend search. What's out there? What is the market looking for? And are you staying on track? That's it, right? You can do it. And the last one is confidence. And I do want to talk about this one a bit. And it's really just your ability to say, I got this. This transition, this next step, I'm going through this transition or change, and somehow in my career, it's ever moving. Career is not stagnant, and to know that you've got it. Now, for me, that C is the most important C. because even to create pause, to think about skills, to own that control and ownership, it all kind of stems from confidence. And so I do briefly, before we wrap up today, want to talk about, there's a great book called The Happiness Trap. And in that book, it talks about confidence comes from self-esteem. But what feeds self-esteem is a lot of external. It's a lot of like, you're doing great, pat on the back, awesome performance review. You're getting championed, but it's a lot of external voices. That's a lot of work. That takes a lot of energy to keep that self-esteem up. But a better way to reframe it that the book talks about is through values. And a lot of career coaches do a lot of values work. Because if you know that work-life balance or learning or a challenge or innovation are things that drive you, when someone comes to you with that opportunity, you can say, thank you so much for thinking about me for that project. Should you have, a need, we're short of hands, happy to jump in. I would love in the future if you think about me for these 3 projects. Just a minor change, because now we're starting to communicate what we want. We're communicating that brand. And I don't need esteem to be excited to share that because my values are so that's really it for today. I just wanted to wrap up on that. But I think those 4 C's are a really great foundation for people to find that alignment and really prioritize career development.
Really great overview of career development and good tips for our audience. Thank you so much, Vicki, for joining Keystone's Coach's Corner on this episode.
Thanks, Dave, for having me. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Hennessy Report from Keystone Partners. Be sure to subscribe to listen to all of our conversations with leaders in HR. Go to KeystonePartners.com and click on the podcast button.